Record on this computer. Yes. All right, we are in record mode. Yes, welcome to the BNSA $1 Million Mastermind bonus session, Authority of One, Building Confidence from Your Core with Candace Fitzpatrick. CSP, she's the founder and CEO of Core Clarity and works primarily with executives to help lead their organizations more effectively, efficiently, and intentionally. During this call, guys, we're going to go over the fundamentals of the Core Clarity framework so you will intimately understand your own charts. Now, Candace has heard me say this before. I'm a person that has created my own assessments. I've been doing assessments for years. This is the best one by far. And I spent 90 minutes with Candace. Candace is also my fellow CSP mastermind partner, so we're writing books together and everything. She changed my life. And I knew that she had to come in here and do the same thing for my heart BNSA fellow members. So I want to shut up because I just want them to take all the rest of this time just to hear from you. So welcome, Candace.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marquessa. And a lot of people, now I see we have 12 participants on. 17 of the 29 agreed to allow us to use their talents and their profiles. I didn't put the groups together because I didn't want them to be not complete. That's something that we can do later, but I'm going to be sending some charts with all 17 of you together after this so that you'll be able to see these even more closely. But to set this up, I'm writing some books right now, and the 90-minute call that you mentioned, we're going to do for everyone that wants to have it done. So if somebody wants to have a 90-minute call with me regarding their talents and their information, that's fabulous. We're ready to go with that. Now I am noticing that I need to share the screen. I've got something really unusual up here right now, but I think I'm figuring it out because it's where I left it. Goodness, we need to make sure that we watch that stuff, don't we? Okay, so yeah, this is Authority of One, and I identify an Authority of One as being a person who knows who they are, who knows who they are at their core, so that they can author their life from this point forward. So an Authority of One knows who they are, they know where they're going, they know how they're going to get there, and they really understand what they have inside to help them get to that point. So all of you took the assessment, and you're going to see some interesting information on here that's a little bit different. But I want to start out with a quote-unquote NSA type story. Imagine it's the first day of school. Now, for some of you, that's really exciting. And for me, because I love to learn, I love the first day of school and the new clothes and the new school equipment. I mean, my gosh, new pencils and paper and the whole thing, everything that went with that, and the books I got. I mean, I love that stuff. Some people loved school because they hadn't seen their friends all summer and they were going to get back and they were going to be together with their friends. But there's also a lot of children that fear school, that really hated it. That, you know, when I said that, some of you might have had your heart kind of constrict a little because your memories of that first day of school are different than mine or some of us out here. Well, it's not just the first day of school, it's the first day of middle school in Del Norte, Colorado. Let me tell you a little bit about Del Norte. It sits on the edge of this 100-mile wide valley. And in this valley, they have, it's at 8,500 feet above sea level, first of all. So it's really high in the mountains. It's the largest intermountain valley that they've been able to identify in the world. And in Del Norte, because of the unique landscape and the unique place that they grow potatoes. Now, for those of you that have ever been around farming, potatoes is a high maintenance crop. There are an awful lot of migrant farm workers that live in this community. It is one of the poorest communities in the Colorado school districts. And in fact, the year before, they had been named, not in a good way, 162 out of 178 in their ranking as one of the worst schools in Colorado. Now, this is the first day of school, and the children are told by their teachers, you're going to take an assessment today or tomorrow. We're going to get all of the sixth graders to take this. And that was their first year in middle school. And everyone's going to take this assessment. It's going to share with us what your top 3 emerging talents are out of a field of 10. So what happened is all the children went in and they took an assessment called Strengths Explorer for ages 10 through 14. Different than what you all took, which is Strengths, Strengths Finder, which gives you your top 5 out of a field of 34. But this is something that they had just created that month, and Gallup released it in July of 2006. So all the children went in to take it, and one of the teachers that was watching the children as they took the assessment was Denise Benavides. Mrs. B, as she was affectionately known, was also the 3rd grade teacher for all of these children. So she was a familiar person in their lives. But what she was doing in the 6th grade is she was going to be teaching math. And one of the distinguishing factors about this 6th grade class is more than half of them were failing math coming into the 6th grade. It was, just horrendous conditions for these children for their academic performance. Now, if any of you remember going from elementary school to high school or to junior high or middle school, there's a transition there. And in the educational field, it is an inflection point where if we know that the children can successfully navigate this particular point in their educational career, they will go on and their chances of graduating from high school are very high. Now, Del Norte, 65% of these children were on a free or reduced lunch program, which meant that the poverty rate in Del Norte was higher than 65%. Some of these parents were too proud to sign their children up for the free lunch program. The other thing that we know, because of the migrant farm worker community, more than 50% of these children were Hispanic. And in the educational system in the US, the highest percentage of dropouts, or not the highest percentage, I'm sorry, the highest number of dropouts in the US come from the Hispanic community. So these were kids that were really not, they were high risk. They were not expected to succeed. It was a difficult situation. Now, one of the children came in with the very first group, the first wave of children that came in to take the assessment, and his name was Nicholas. And if you talk to Mrs. B or even look at Nicholas, there are a couple of things you'll notice. Number one, he was shorter than the other children. He was, very slight of build, but he also had these glasses on, and his glasses were the thickness of Coke bottles. And you could also tell that there was something different about him because these glasses were held on by a band on his head, because if they came off, he was legally blind. So Nicholas, again, in a very poor district, in very challenging circumstances, is one of their resource kids. Now, in my day and age, we called them special ed. But he was one of their resource kids, and he was taking the assessment with the first group, and he had his mouse. And Mrs. B was a little bit concerned because the first wave of kids had come and left. The second wave of kids had come in, and some of them were starting to leave. And of course, they were talking because kids that age do that. And Nicholas had to have heard some of their comments about the fact that he was still there, and he was there when they came in, he was there when they left. Mrs. B was really concerned, so she went up behind him and she noticed he was on the last question. In fact, it said up on the screen, after you finish this question, your top 3 emerging talents will be shared with you. And he just couldn't hit the mouse to go forward. Finally, he gets the courage up and he hits the mouse. He opens one eye, then the other eye, and he jumps up and he screams, Mrs. B, come quick. It's not blank. I have talents. That day changed my life. I got stories that entire year from the class from the teachers, my sister, who was the bully-proof coordinator for the district, and from all sorts of different areas about what was happening with these children because they discovered their talents. And for me, we learned a lot about the talents through those children also. Now, I'll come back to the kids, but one of the biggest things that we learned is there are something I call the 3 major fault lines. And this is that growing up, most of us think that, one, everyone else thinks the same way we do. And this usually holds true until we meet someone or something happens to show us otherwise, or we get married. We usually marry our opposite. The second thing is that we think everyone has the same talents we do, plus what we see in them that we don't have. And this isn't true either. We have different talents than other people. We just think it's a level playing field, and then they got something that we didn't get. And the third of the major fault lines, and again, these are faulty ways of reasoning that we have growing up that we have to shed by the time we're adults. And the third major fault line is we think when somebody says something to us that they're talking about us, when in fact what they have to say has an awful lot more to say about who they are than who we are. And I'll get into that a little bit as we go in. And if I don't, bring me back and remind me, because that's a very important point for you to understand. So today, what I want to go through really quickly, because I want to have everyone have the same information so that if we do go together on this 90-minute call, then what we're going to be able to do is start at a higher level and get to your issues a lot more quickly. So I'm going to go over the strength psychology so you understand where this came from. I'm going to go through the talent themes and the categories so you understand what those colors are and what all those charts I sent you are talking about. We're going to talk about the core clarity pyramid, which was the very first chart that I sent you and the very first page of the first chart. Then we're going to explore some core drills, and this is what Marquesa has been just saying, oh my gosh, what's the name? Who are they? Where is that going? So that you'll understand that a little better. And then I'm going to talk about your collaborative advantage. I took the talents of all 17 of you who agreed to allow me to use the talents. And it looks like 15 of you are on the call. There were 2 that said they wouldn't make it. So it looks like we're right at the right number. But I took all of your talents and I put them together, and I created a way of looking at you as a group in a way that maybe you wouldn't have considered before. And then where do we go from here? What's next after this particular step? But first, a word from our attorneys. Number 1, this is what Gallup asked us to share with people when we do this work. Actually, the first one is not quite there, but we do use animations in our PowerPoints. We do license those through Animation Factory, and you can too if you want animations in a PowerPoint. But the biggest ones that Gallup has asked us to share is to let you understand that the 34 Clifton StrengthsFinder theme names are trademarks of the Gallup organization. We are not a part of the Gallup organization. What we do is we interpret the results from your StrengthsFinder assessment. When I get to the point where I diverge from the Gallup information into what Core Clarity has developed over the years, I will be very specific about that because I want you to understand where that came, because Gallup has asked us to do that. So that's my legal disclaimer, and we're off and running. Strength psychology. Don Clifton was getting his PhD in the 1950s, and in one of his classes, in one of the psychology classes, one of his professors made an interesting observation. He said, you know, it's interesting to me that in psychology, all we study are sick people, people who are ill, people who are having problems. I wonder if we started looking at people who were well, people who were successful, people who were healthy, if we would find something different. And this stuck as a young student in Don's mind. And he thought, you know what? I want to study strengths. And he is now known as the father of strength psychology. So he wondered, what is it that makes people successful in the business world? Not what makes them fail, not what makes them ill, but what makes people successful. So he decided at that moment that he would start to study excellence. And for more than 50 years now, his company, and what is now a part of the Gallup organization, has been systematically studying excellence in business. They've been very specific about how they've gone about it. And they went in, they started in the 1960s, and they took the top 2% of achievers in the business world, and they started asking open-ended questions from them. And over time, they have collected more than 2 million of these interviews. I have to help you understand, this is a massive amount of research where they went in and followed these people for a period of time, like through a week on their first interviews, and then they checked with them over time to make sure that their success lasted over the years. Now, interesting for those of us at NSA, does anybody recognize the name Jim Cathcart? Jim Cathcart was one of the people that they interviewed. He was doing Don Clifton's strategic planning back in the 1980s when Don was really pulling this all together and starting to look at it. But they were looking at the top 2% of performers, anywhere from hotel housekeepers to CEOs of companies in all sorts of different industries. And they were looking for what Don believed were success strengths. Now, in 1988, something important happened in Don's evolution as a company. He had a little company called SRI, Selection Research Inc. in Lincoln, Nebraska. And he was also a professor at the University of Nebraska. But in 1988, the Gallup brothers approached him and said, Don, we have the Gallup organization, and our father left it to us, and we are at an age that we need to sell. Are you interested in buying us? And Don was kind of taken aback because he's this little itty bitty company in Lincoln, Nebraska, that's family owned, and here's the Gallup organization asking, do you want to buy us? And they said it was because there were only 2 people that they were able to identify who had studied successful people in business. One was Don Clifton, the other was their father, who did studies back in the 1980s of about 250,000 people who were successful in business. And they loved what Don was doing. They loved the integrity of the work that he was doing. And they said, if we sell, we want to sell it to you. Are you interested? Took them 4 years to gather the funds. And in 1992, SRI completed the purchase of the Gallup organization. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of SRI. I don't know, can they raise their hands, Marquesa, or something? If they can, that'd be great. But
yeah, they can raise their hands.
Okay, so has anybody heard of SRI? I mean, ever? Yeah, that's pretty typical of what I get. Now, has anyone heard of the Gallup organization?
And guys, if you can't raise your hand, just put it in chat, okay? If you don't know how to raise your hand, look like they do. So you got several hand raises there.
Yeah, okay, great. Oh, and I can pull chat up, sorry. Okay, and I see, can't Don, has Robert, can you see my screen now? Yeah, you're okay, great. Okay, so they completed the purchase of the Gallup organization in 1992, and they were still looking for these strengths, and they were still doing these interviews. In 1998, somebody who, if you don't know of him as a speaker, you need to learn about him. Marcus Buckingham came to Don and he said, Don, I've been here 12 years working with you, trying to figure out, where these elusive success strengths of yours are, and we haven't found them. But oh my gosh, we own the Gallup organization, and SRI did not make Gallup take the SRI name, they took the Gallup name. And they became Gallup Consulting, and he said, but they were 2 separate companies. And he said, we've got all these people over here that understand data and then work with it, and we own the computers. Maybe the computing power is strong enough now to take these almost 2 million interviews and put them in there and see if we can come up with your elusive success strengths. So Don's original hypothesis was successful people must have specific success strengths that make them successful, because not everybody's successful. That's what he was looking for. And when they had all the information in the computers, what kicked out was Don's original hypothesis was wrong. It's not that successful people have specific success strengths that make them successful. It's that successful people understand their talents and strengths, and they build their lives on them on a daily basis. So his whole hypothesis was wrong. This kind of turned it on an edge. But what I love about this is it means that any of us can be successful so long as we build our lives on our talents and strengths. They also found that the